You're tuned into the Spot Up Pod, the official podcast of the Spot Up Shot newsletter. I'm your host, Paul Garcia. In today's episode, final takeaways on the Spurs' Summer League team and previewing the upcoming offseason for San Antonio. All right, so I am recording this episode on Sunday afternoon. So the Spurs have completed their Las Vegas Summer League schedule. And so now what I want to do is go through some of my takeaways. What I want to do is discuss how the players kind of played. And I did go into in-depth detail in last week's episode over a lot of these games. So I'm going to just do an overall summary of the players. And then from there, I'm going to go through my expectations before Summer League and if those have changed for the players after Summer League. So let's begin with Dylan Harper. So Harper only played in 2 Summer League games in Las Vegas, averaging 22 minutes per game, 16 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 0.5 blocks, 3.5 turnovers, and shooting splits of 36, 13, and 79% shooting splits. On offense, some of his positives, he showed his ability to drive inside with screen action or just by beating his defender off the dribble. He also displayed his speed burst in the open court with good control of finishing there at the rim in the open court. He was also able to get multiple free throw attempts in these games in Las Vegas. I think he got 6 free throw attempts per game. Just some of the things he'll have to work on. And again, it was a very small sample size of just 2 games. Learning how to attack against a collapsing defense inside. That was something that I guess he got to see for the first time, was just how quickly the NBA defenders can go in there and provide help. And it makes his layups and his floaters a little bit more challenging. There was also some unfamiliarity with some of his Summer League teammates on his passes. And that's understandable. Again, he didn't really get to play much, just 2 games and very limited practice time as well. And then also, I'm not going to put too much into his outside shot. I know that he only shot, 13% from 3. But again, he only played in 2 games. He did make one open one in the corner. So I'm not putting too much into his outside shot, considering the small sample size of games that he played in. On defense, some of the positives we saw were he got down and really played some good full court defense in that game against Dallas, being very physical, hounding the ball handler, bringing the ball up the court. He also had that spectacular block against the Mavs in the open court when he blocked a layup attempt with his left hand, getting really high up in the air. And then I will just say, I think he can bring that level of defense in his games with San Antonio this coming season, because he's going to be most likely coming, in a bench role. So he won't be playing, 30, 40 minutes a night. He's going to be probably playing 20, 25 minutes a game, which is good, because then just in his time that he's out on the floor, he's able to focus on his defense and really bring that level of aggression. I think you saw him bring there against Dallas, where he can bring that hounding defense against the ball handlers alongside Stephon Castle and alongside De'Aaron Fox and some of the other Spurs players on the roster. So before Summer League, my expectation for Harper was that he would be the backup point guard on the Spurs and possibly challenge Stephon Castle for the starting shooting guard role. I'm going to go ahead and stick with that after, again, it was just 2 games, so I'm not putting too much into the Summer League games. But same thing where he again, I think he's going to be the backup point guard for the Spurs coming into the season. And I do think in training camp and preseason, he'll have a chance to try to challenge Castle for the starting shooting guard spot. But again, I think Castle has that spot locked up just because of the experience he already has as of playing a year already in the NBA. And he kind of knows, what that level of play is going to bring. So again, I do expect Harper to most likely be the backup point guard for the Spurs when the opening night tips off in October. All right, next up, let's talk about Carter Bryant. So he ends up playing in 6 total games between both the California Classic and the Las Vegas Summer League. Averages 24.1 minutes, 7.3 points, 4.2 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 0.3 steals, 1.7 blocks, 3.2 turnovers, and shooting splits of 29% from the floor, 26% from 3, and 80% from the free throw line. On offense, some of his positives I noted was that, of course, we know that throughout the entire Summer League, he didn't have his three-point shot quite down just yet, but we did see him finally go off in that final game that he played in against Charlotte when he made 4 of 6 triples. A lot of those were wide open because, for 2 reasons. One, the Hornets were they had a mismatch where they had their big man Ryan Kalkbrenner guarding Bryant, but then also they were purposely trying to really trap David Jones-Garcia and really take away the paint from the Spurs by having their bigs play more of a zone defense. That's something that Harris and Ingram brought up after the game, or somebody brought that up after the game. Anyway, so because basically the Hornets were daring him to shoot threes, he went ahead and did that, and sure enough, he made 4 or 6 triples in that game against Charlotte. That was probably the best he's looked offensively in that game against Charlotte. And I will just say that in that game, he really waited till the shots came to him. There wasn't as much putting the ball on the floor and trying to force things inside. And those are some of the negatives I noticed throughout the few Summer League weeks, was, the times that he would try to pump fake and drive inside, he'd get called for travel sometimes, or kind of forcing shots going inside against multiple defenders. And that's something, again, as a young player, he's going to learn So again, I didn't see him do as much of that in that game against Charlotte, where he was more so taking what the defense was giving him. On defense, of course, a lot of positives. He had some really good games where he was a monster defensively, wreaking havoc all over the floor, providing some help blocks off the glass, switching multiple positions, just going from like starting off, hounding someone, bringing the ball up court, then switching onto a big, then ending up right underneath the rim. Just a lot of different things that he does defensively. And that's his ready to go skill right now at the NBA level is his defense that he's going to bring. So before Summer League, I did expect Carter Bryant to be out of the Spurs' 10-man rotation, but I did think that he could battle Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sochan for some minutes there off the bench. And so after Summer League, I will say the same, where at least you saw that, yes, his defense definitely holds up against at least Summer League against Summer League players. So I definitely think that he's going to put pressure on Champagnie, Keldon, and Sochan to get going right away in training camp in the preseason and at least the first 2 weeks of the season. Because if not, if Bryant's bringing this level of defense, I think he has a chance to challenge them for some minutes, and especially if his three ball starts falling like it did in that game against the Charlotte Hornets. If his three ball's falling in training camp and the preseason, then yeah, he has a good chance to try to crack the rotation. But again, right now I do see him outside as a reserve role on opening night of the regular season. But again, there's a long way to go to see what he improves on. Next up is David Jones-Garcia, and again, I do want to note that I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, so so far he hasn't been signed by the Spurs or any other team, but I know he's most likely going to get signed soon. So let's just talk about his performance in Summer League. So in 8 games between both California and Las Vegas, he ends up averaging 25.3 minutes, 22 points per game, 5.9 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 1.2 steals, 0 blocks, 3.8 turnovers, and shooting splits of 52% from the floor, 51% from 3, 88% from the foul line. So let's talk about his offense first, his positives. 3-level scoring ability we saw there, with the ability to use hesitation and dribble crossovers to get to the free throw line, draw contact. He really had his 3-ball going, like I said, shooting 51% throughout the entire Summer League, all 8 games. He only had one bad shooting night, and that was against Charlotte, and part of that was how they were playing him defensively. But again, he showed his arsenal of 3-point ability, spot-up threes, sidestep threes, pull-ups out of crossovers, all different ways that he can make 3-point shots in his Las Vegas run, or in his entire Summer League run. He's also good about crashing the offensive glass for a guard. He showed some elements of setting up his teammates by driving inside, collapsing the defense on him, and then kicking out to shooters. Sometimes he had low assist numbers, though, at times because his teammates didn't make some of the shots that he generated for them. He also, what I wanted to say there about Charlotte was that in that Charlotte game, and also this carried over into the Detroit Pistons game, the final one, he did start to see a lot of trapping in the half court where, teams were really, if they were at Spurs were at a pick and roll or a double drag scene, they were really just collapsing on David Jones-Garcia. So that way he couldn't beat the team. He was forcing players like Harrison Ingram or Carter Bryant to beat them instead, or the other team was. And then also we saw a lot of full court pressure on him where, in those games against Charlotte and against Detroit, those smaller guards were really hounding him throughout the entire game. So a lot of times he would have either Carter Bryant bring the ball up or Harrison Ingram bring the ball up. So that was something that we noticed, that I noticed, was just how much the defense was really honed in on him to try to take him away for their best chance to try to beat the Spurs. He played well, either starting or coming off the bench. So we do know that he did come off the bench those 2 games that Dylan Harper played in, but he still put up his numbers. His negatives on offense that I noticed throughout the few weeks was that he can be a little loose with his passes. Sometimes he thinks that the pass is right there, but then the defense intercepts it. Those were usually on his drives when he was driving inside. Sometimes, though, he only passes because the defense is really, taking away his driving lane or really corralling him inside. He also had some moments where he didn't pass at all, where he was just kind of like pounding the ball for an entire possession, trying to beat his defender off the dribble, couldn't get something, and then ends up forcing like a floater or a spinning mid-ranger that missed. So there was some elements of that as well. And then at times when he's driving, though, his dribble can be a little loose with his crossovers, and he ends up just losing the ball, and then the defense gets it. So again, those are some of the positive and negatives for David Jones-Garcia in these few weeks of Summer League. On defense, some of his positives, he had some moments of being physical and getting into guys when defending them, but he also had some moments where off the ball where he fell asleep, and just that most recent game against Detroit, he's guarding a corner shooter, the player kind of cuts behind him, and then the other offensive player finds that his teammate for a wide open dunk, and David Jones-Garcia was pretty far away on that play, kind of just fell asleep on that defensive play. So before Summer League, I will admit I had no idea who he was, David Jones-Garcia, and I just remember in that first game, it was one of the first California Classic games, I didn't really think too much of him. I know he put up some numbers, but I was just like, man, this guy's more like a ball hog. I don't really, he's just putting up shots. But then as I started to watch more of those California games and then more of the Vegas games, of course, I did start to notice his 3-level scoring ability, the way he was able to set up teammates, the way, the Spurs' offense really needed him to carry them at times. And so that's where I started to appreciate a little bit more of his game and what he's bringing out there on the court. And so, of course, as the summer league went along, I kind of had a better understanding of who he was as a player, not just a player who just takes shots, and especially that he shot really efficient in all these games overall when you look at the full body of work for him. And then after Summer League, I can see him. So where is he after Summer League? I can see him in 4 different ways in terms of contracts. So I could see him getting a 2-way with the Spurs or another NBA team. I could see him getting a training camp invite with the Spurs or another NBA team. I could also see him getting a guaranteed contract for the veteran minimum with the Spurs or another NBA team. However, it's not just the NBA that has interest in him. It's also overseas. Olympiacos, a Greek club overseas, they reportedly have interest, according to Sportando, in David Jones Garcia as of Sunday morning. The latest reports were that there's definitely interest in him from Olympiacos, but Garcia is also weighing, trying to see what offers come in at the NBA level first. I think that for him to go overseas, I think that he didn't get a full guaranteed deal from an NBA team, and 2, maybe the overseas team is giving him more than the NBA veteran minimum. So right now at the NBA veteran minimum, a minimum for Jones Garcia would be $1.2 million. So if maybe a European club is beating that number, then I could see him maybe deciding to go overseas instead. So again, we'll kind of see what's going on with David Jones Garcia. I do expect that his decision will come pretty soon here within the next few days or weeks at the latest. So again, as of Sunday afternoon, he has not been signed by the Spurs or any other team just yet. So again, I think that he will end up getting some sort of contract somewhere. We'll just see if it's here coming up in the NBA or maybe overseas. Next player is Riley Minix. So he played 5 games between both California and Vegas, 23.9 minutes, 10.6 points, 4.6 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 0.6 steals, 0.4 blocks, 1.2 turnovers, and shot 49% from the floor, 45% from 3, and 100% from the free throw line. On offense, his positives, he's a lights-out shooter from outside, spot-up shooter. He really knows his role out there on the floor. He can put the ball on the floor at times on drives, and sometimes he made good passes to his cutting teammates or used a pump fake to draw fouls using that pump fake action. There were other times, though, I will admit that where he did lose the ball into some of his drives, especially when the defense kind of collapsed on him. But again, he kind of knows his role. He's out there mainly to space the floor for the team. On defense, he hustled out there when he was on defense. Looked like he could guard 3s or 4s at times, and also he got switched onto some guards as well, and he tried his best to guard them. But again, if you have him out on the floor, it's mostly going to be for the offensive end of the floor. So before Summer League, I did think Minix would end up on a 2-way contract with the Spurs, because at that time, before going into Summer League, I thought that Sandro Mamukelashvili, there would be a chance he could return on a veteran minimum. But nope, Mamu got signed to the Toronto Raptors. So now after Summer League, I still think either Minix could end up on a 2-way contract with the Spurs, or I could even see the Spurs bumping him up and giving him a standard NBA contract and kind of filling that role as a reserve forward off the bench that Mamu used to have with San Antonio in certain lineups or for certain games. And I do want to note that right now, Minix does have a qualifying offer to return to the Spurs on a 2-way contract. All right, next up is Harrison Ingram. So Ingram played in all 8 games between both California and Vegas, 20.8 minutes, 7.6 points, 6.4 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.1 blocks, 1.4 turnovers, and shot 36% from the floor, 37% from 3, and 82% from the free throw line. So on offense, some of his positives, he's a really good connector, kind of can bring the ball up at times up the floor, get the team into their sets. We saw him do this when the Hornets and the Pistons were both applying full court pressure to David Jones Garcia. He also finds the right player on his drives, whether that's a player cutting or a player near the rim of the dunker spot or someone at the 3-point line. Scoring wise, that's still the area where he needs to kind of work on in his game. So his 3-point shot, I will say, was kind of up and down. He did have a really good game against the Hornets when they were leaving him wide open for a bunch of threes. I think he went like 5 of 11 from distance on that game. But overall, a lot of times, they were wide open threes because teams were willing to either double or trap David Jones Garcia and leaving Harrison Ingram open from 3. And again, he shot 37% there on threes. When driving inside, though, there were some times, though, especially, and you see this in his field goal percentage, where he shot 36% from the floor, where he kind of, throws some floaters or some layups up against, multiple defenders there in the paint, kind of clogging the lane. So that's something where he needs to continue to work. On defense, positives, versatile defender, can switch multiple positions, hustles on defense, goes for boards and gets going the other way, can kind of get the defense rebound and then start taking it downhill on the other side of the floor. So before Summer League, I thought Ingram might return on a two-way contract with the Spurs. After Summer League, I still think he'll probably be on a two-way with the Spurs, if not a training camp invite with San Antonio or somewhere in the G League with another NBA team. But again, most likely another two-way with the Spurs. So I do want to say too, though, like the fact that he played in all Summer League games, that the Spurs didn't have him rest a game or sit out of a game, and he even played up into the last game, that might be a sign too that San Antonio's kind of still evaluating whether or not to bring him back for next season. So again, that's just my interpretation of him, playing in all of the games. So again, we'll kind of see what happens with Ingram. Like Riley Minix, Ingram does have a qualifying offer to return right now on a two-way contract. If the Spurs and Ingram, where Ingram wanted to become a free agent, an unrestricted free agent, he and the Spurs would have to mutually agree on withdrawing his qualifying offer. All right, so now I want to go through a quick offseason preview of the Spurs' calendar from now until the start of the regular season, kind of some of the important dates or dates that are coming up here. So I want to go back in time actually to July 14th, because there was some significant news that I have not addressed here on the Spotted Pod, and that was that Victor Wembanyama has been cleared to return to basketball. So according to French journalist Maxime Aubing of L'Equipe, a French outlet, Victor told Maxime that he's been cleared to return to basketball after getting clearance from the Spurs' medical staff. ESPN and some other outlets also confirmed that the Spurs have given him the green light to resume basketball activities. So that's great news that Wemby has come back from his blood clot issue from back in February, and now he should be ready to start training camp and the preseason after getting the medical clearance from the San Antonio Spurs' medical staff. So again, that was on July 14th that news came out. So now sometime in July, again, I'm putting sometime because we are expecting the preseason schedule to get announced pretty soon here. So last year it actually came out already by July 11th. It's now July 20th. It's July 20th, and it still hasn't come out. So I do expect that the preseason schedule will be coming out here fairly soon in the coming days. Then on August 1st, that's a key date for Julian Champagnie, because now on August 1st, his contract fully guarantees for $3 million. Right now, he's on a non-guaranteed deal. I do expect Champagnie to remain on the roster, so his deal will most likely guarantee on August 1st. Then 2 days after Champagnie's full contract guarantees, then there's a big date. It's August 3rd. And so here's why August 3rd is important for the Spurs. That is the day that De'Aaron Fox can officially sign his extension with the Spurs if he and San Antonio have interest in coming forward or going forward with an extension. So Fox has been on the record of saying that he hopes to get an extension with the Spurs, and so we'll see what happens. So I just want to kind of go through a little bit about Fox's extension. I will be writing about his extension later on as we get closer to August. So using the projected $165 million salary cap from Real GM, De'Aaron Fox, for a max extension player with 7-9 years of experience, where Fox is, because he's had 8 years of experience, his projected starting salary in year one of a new extension would be $49.5 million. So I am interested to see, before the Spurs knew that they were going to get Dylan Harper in the draft, I thought for sure, come August, a 4-year extension for De'Aaron Fox would have just been right there on the table. So again, if it's a 4-year deal, it would be $222 million for 4 years based on this salary cap of $165 million next year. Now that they got Dylan Harper, though, I do wonder if maybe they'd see if maybe they can negotiate with Fox on maybe getting a 2 or 3 year deal. Well, because maybe they want to eventually have Harper become one of the starting point guard or Steph Castle, and have those two players in the backcourt for their future. So again, there's different avenues to look at this, and there's also a positive in a way for Fox financially if he takes a shorter deal. So again, here's the 3 options here for Fox. So there's the 4-year deal, as I mentioned, $222 million for Fox. Again, they could look at maybe all 4 years, or maybe doing like a 3+1, 3 years. Guaranteed, and then the 4th year have it maybe be a player option or team option, whatever they figure out. There's a 3-year deal. Here's where it goes a little bit shorter. So if it's a 3-year deal, it's going to be for $160 million. They could try a 2+1, so 2 years guaranteed, and then the final year Fox might be able to have a player option. The benefit of this for Fox is that by the year 29-30, he's now had 11 years of experience, meaning that he would if he opted out and tried to get a new contract with the Spurs or another team as a free agent, he'd only be 30 years old, and his contract would start at $67 million, because now he's met the criteria as a player with over 10 years of experience. Or they could go even shorter, the Spurs and Fox, and look at a 2-year deal for $103 million. Then in 28-29 offseason, he's now had 10 years of experience, meaning that if he opts out of that second year of the player option, or after the 2 years, should I say, then he would be eligible to sign a new salary of $64 million at just 29 years old with the Spurs or someone else. So again, I am interested to see how that plays out for Fox and the Spurs with his extension coming up here in early August, on August 3rd. And so I do wonder too if maybe a 4-year deal isn't right there locked in place anymore now that the Spurs have Harper, and also that there could be some financial incentive for Fox to take a shorter deal because he can re-enter free agency and as a player with over 10 years experience, where he might be able to get $64 million in year one, or even perhaps $67 million in year one of a new deal. So again, I'll be writing more about that in the offseason as in the next few weeks before August 3rd eventually gets here. So that's an important date, is August 3rd for De'Aaron Fox. Then in mid-August, the regular season schedule should be getting announced pretty soon. So last year, the regular season schedule did get announced on August 15th. So again, that's what I'm saying, mid-August. We should know all the 82 games for the Spurs this coming season. In late August, from August 27th up until mid-September, September 14th, that's an important date for Jeremy Sochan because it's Eurobasket 2025. So if Sochan ends up playing with the Polish national team for Poland, then yeah, he would be participating overseas in Eurobasket August 27th through September 14th. Then in late September or early October, because again, we don't know exactly when training camp starts, that will be when training camp begins, either again, late September or early October. I do want to note that during training camp, the Spurs can have up to 21 players on their roster, but that roster needs to be trimmed down to 15 players on guaranteed contracts or standard contracts and 3 players on two-ways by the time opening night gets here. So again, it wouldn't be surprising to me if the Spurs end up adding a few players to what we call Exhibit 10 contracts, which are training camp contracts basically between now and that training camp date, whenever that is set. And I do want to note that the Spurs do have 2 open roster spots right now, and they have 3 open two-way spots as of right now that I'm recording this on July 20th. Then in early October, again, we don't know the official dates yet, but the preseason will begin for the Spurs after training camp takes place for about a week or two. Then mid-October gets here. And here's some things that will happen mid-October. So in mid-October, the Spurs will likely exercise. Well, they will. They're going to exercise team options for both Wemby and Stephon Castle for their team options and their rookie scale contracts. I just don't know what date they're going to do that. So again, last year they did it on October 18th, and so again, I kind of expect sometime around mid-October for that to happen. And they do have up until October 31st, but the Spurs don't usually let that date drag out all the way to the 31st. And then finally, tentatively, I'm just saying October 20th. Let's just say the regular season's about to start around October 20th. That is important for a few reasons. For one, the Spurs, by the time opening night gets here, they do need to sign at least one more player to a standard contract, roster contract, to have 14 players on standard contracts. And also, that is the last day, the day before the regular season, to get an extension done with Jeremy Sochan if the Spurs and Sochan have interest in doing so. As far as, I'll also write more about Sochan's extension options as well. But again, right now, I'm not so sure the Spurs are going to extend Sochan this offseason, and for a few reasons. One, maybe they just want to let him go into restricted free agency next summer in 2026 and see, what offers he gets, and if it's an offer they're willing to match with, then they would have the ability to do so, because he would be a restricted free agent, and also because I think there's still a little bit too many question marks on with his offense, exactly where he fits out in the offensive end, especially with his 3-point shot. Maybe if that develops this coming season, there's a better chance of him staying with the Spurs long term. But again, I think that's why maybe they just wait and let Sochan test out restricted free agency next summer instead of giving him a extension this current offseason, because they still have Bryant coming up here, especially next year in year 2. I think he would be ready to add right away, or be ready to be inserted right away into the rotation if Sochan were to leave to another team in free agency. So again, I think that right now, just how I'm seeing it, I do think that they might hold off on giving Sochan an extension. We'll see if that changes between now and the first day of the regular season, when they can get an extension done. In the event they did want to get an extension done, I would start right away at the looking at the non-tax MLE amount for next summer, which is $15 million. So if they do that, they could sign Sochan to a 2 to 5 year extension, anywhere from a 2 years extension would be for $31 million for 2 years, 3-year extension $49 million for 3 years, 4-year extension $67 million for 4 years, and then 5-year extension $87 million for 5 years. Again, that's where, if they were going to extend Sochan, I think that's where they would probably start the negotiations, would be around the non-tax MLE amount for next season. So now that we're in the off season, I will be sprinkling in episodes here and there in the next few weeks until training camp eventually gets here in late September, October. I won't be sticking to a set schedule here on the Spotted Pod, but I will be having episodes coming in and out. Mainly, I will be putting up episodes for sure if there's any kind of breaking news, or I'm going to be writing some off season pieces as well, and I'll be reflecting on those pieces here on the Spotted Pod. So make sure to subscribe to the newsletter at thespotupshot.com, where I'll still be writing multiple pieces per week. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Spotted Pod. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast apps and our YouTube channel. The Spotted Pod is recorded and produced by Paul Garcia. The music for this episode was written by Vincent Garcia and Paul Garcia. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.